YouTube, hello knife community, hello everybody else. Welcome to the channel. This is the Home Slice. I'm Gabe and I'm going to give you guys another sharpening update. So some of you have asked or wondered what sort of guides was I using on the sharpening that I did for the knives that were sent over to Pete at Cedric and Ada. And they were these guys. And if you look at them and think, hey, that just looks like a piece of 2x2 that got chopped at an angle, you're exactly right. I made these just with a drop saw, set it at an angle, and then you have something to bump your knife up against to guide your hand to the correct angle. But before you go and do that yourself, stop. Don't do that. Because these and every other edge angle guide, if you're using a flat ground knife, may actually mess up your angle unless you follow these instructions that I'm about to lay out carefully. Let's get started. So what do you mean, Gabe? You may ask. Well, this demonstration is geared toward guys who are using hand sharpening systems. To explain this, I've constructed the world's sketchiest camera holder. And let's just say this is a wedge-shaped sharpening guide. Often, a hand sharpening system will offer you guidance in the form of a wedge. That wedge will be created at a certain angle, and that angle is supposed to replicate the angle that it's at along your edge. Why is this a big deal, Gabe? You may also ask. Well, let's say you've got a hollow ground knife. Yes, I just cut this out of printer paper, okay? Your hollow grind knife, if you line it up along the flat for your edge guidance, you can see this blue denotes the midline of the knife where it should be for that edge angle to be created at 20 degrees. You'll do just fine, okay? So if you're using a hollow grind knife and you're aligning to the wedge like this and not like that, you should be okay. However, if you have a flat ground knife, then what do you have to align to? Well, you only have the grind to align to. Now notice, this is exaggerated, but notice this is the midpoint of the blade, okay? So this angle needs to be the same as this angle. And ideally, both these points should be lining up along the cutting board. If we go back to our hollow ground knife, you'll notice that as you nest the blade, the flat of the blade, I should say, against the sharpening guide, you are following cleanly the center line that you need to create a 20-degree edge. However, if you take your flat ground knife and align it the only way that you have, which is along the grind, to the sharpening guides, you will be creating a pretty different angle. On my Spyderco Military, I found the angle change here is about 5 degrees, or from the thickness of this is about 5 degrees total. So this is about 2.5 degrees. Now, if you're a precision sharpener, 2.5 degrees matters. That's the difference between 20 degrees and 17.5 degrees. It's the difference between 17.5 degrees and 15 degrees. And if you watch testing, you know that small differences like that have a large bearing on the performance and characteristics of the edge. Oh no! What do we do? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because I have a cheap and easy and quick way that you can take any flat ground knife and you can create an angle adjusted sharpening guide for it. Before we head over to the shop, I need to mention that what we need to do to correct this problem is to figure out this whole cone, like if this was trailed out to the actual point of this shape without the edge, we need to figure out what is that angle so that we can subtract that angle from the midline to the grind from this stone, because we're only going to get 20 degrees truly when we decrease this angle to make up for this angle, and they both line up to yield that 20-degree edge that we want. So we need, for this demonstration, we need a line more like this. But what is that angle? Well, I'm glad you asked, because we're about to find out. Okay, to create these guides, obviously you need a flat ground knife that you're fitting to. This is a Firebird FH41 in D2. It's one of the only decent folders that I have around, since I sent several of them to Pete. And you'll need a pencil and a block of wood and a chop saw. A big, fat, old Makita chop saw here. So I will show you how to get set up. So the first thing we're going to do is chop a piece of wood that roughly matches the slicing profile of your knife. So to start off, just get the blade held tight against the wood, flush with the top, and then mark off about the thickness of your knife. Then come to the end here and have your knife held flush to the top again and mark how far the blade comes down. Okay, now based on these two marks, we should be able to go over to the chop saw and chop this piece off, and whatever angle successfully chops it off where the two marks meet, that will be the angle that we're shooting for. So I will use this broken Nintendo DS to create the line that we're shooting to replicate, and then we'll go chop until we get that angle. Okay, so the drop saw at home is not working. So I have driven my beast of a moped, 50 whole cc's, down to work with my stick. Let's try this again. So you want to play around with the angle on the saw until the teeth bite in and it seems to match up with the angle that's written in pencil. Okay, we're having saw issues today. This was supposed to be a quick and easy guide. I think it is going to be an easy process if your drop saw actually works. So I'm going to try to oil this thing. We'll see how this goes. Oh yeah. Guesstimated this at 15 degrees. We'll see how close we are. Angle was a little bit too wide on that. You can see, yeah, I got a little bit wider than the pencil mark. So I'm gonna chop it off straight and try again. Okay, we're gonna readjust and we'll try it at 10 degrees. Here we go. Okay, now we see that the piece of wood is the same depth as the grind and it's the same thickness as the knife. What this tells us, yeah, that's a good fit, very good fit. What this tells us is that going this way, our grind angles here are about 10 degrees. Now the flat grind of the knife is going to push off the guide half of that amount. It's going to push the center line, which you're trying to align the edge to, half of that amount off of the guide. So this knife and the grind, we actually need to adjust our guides by 5 degrees. So if I wanted to make, say, a 20-degree guide, I would actually select 15 degrees and cut a guide, a ghetto guide as I like to call them, cut a ghetto guide at 15 degrees, and then the knife is going to do the rest of the adjustment due to the full flat grind. Voila. Okay, this ought to, we'll get a protractor out and we'll measure it, but this ought to, with our knife on top of it, yield a center line that is 20 degrees. Okay, so you can see I've made this little 20-degree piece of paper. It's about the same width of the knife, and if you place it alongside the 20-degree or alongside the 15-degree cut, you can see it is a little bit bigger. Moreover, if you place the knife and guide together and line up their edges, then put this 20-degree piece of paper alongside both, you can see that at this point the paper just comes to the midpoint of the knife, which means that midpoint is set to 20 degrees. That's the best way I can figure out to show it. Hopefully that made sense. And there you go. So using this method, you can make these little guides out of wood for free or cheap using common tools. You can dial in and customize to the angle of any flat ground knife, so you can really get precise angles in hand sharpening. One more thing that I would like to note is that when you're hand sharpening, there are some ways that you can endeavor to keep your angle more consistent. So if you're really going on this journey to try to be able to accurately and consistently produce a certain angle, I'd recommend paying attention to things like, is your wrist locked or are you wobbling around? Are your supporting fingers under the slicing belly of the knife, so as you rotate it, they give consistent pressure through the curve? And maybe, like, most importantly for my sharpening style, if you guys have a similar style to mine, is your wrist locked and your elbow semi-locked so that you can sort of pivot from your shoulder. I'd recommend trying to get the motion in your joints, further out to be less, and turn your whole body with the sharpening stroke. I think if you do that, you'll have an increased level of steadiness in the strokes that you do. That's it for now. Have fun making your own sets of ghetto guides, and we'll see you next time on the Home Slice. Peace out.